One has, of course, to overcome certain moral obstacles, such as vanity, ambition, conceit, resentment, etc.
Mm.
I think the idea of moral obstacles is an astounding idea, because, and this is why, and I'm going to tell you, we live in an age of moral relativism. I think this, in many ways, is a quite a damning throw at Nietzsche's conception. We live in an age of moral relativism where we don't think that there are objective morals. Okay, and what Jung is proposing here is that in order to achieve maximum psychological potential. So as I said before, you've got your problem where you've got your nature, and you have to try deal with the fact that your nature is kind of chaotic. There's something wrong. And so some people are like, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to intellectualize and change it with technology and stuff like that. Jung says what you have to do is you have to build your psychology. So he says build a mindset in many ways. And he says that the obstacles or the tools in many ways, the paths, the way that you get to your highest potential is actually moral. That's what he means by moral. So, for example, the shadow involves you having to be humble. That's a virtue. That's a moral. It's a psychological attitude. That's a crazy fucking idea, because Jung is giving this a very based way of looking at morality as actually pragmatically real. Like, he's almost making it at the very least object or pragmatic, maybe even objective to an extent. Is that everybody who deploys humility with their psychology will see advancements in the quality of their psychology and will lead to a higher level. And that's a quite moral base for why things like virtues and whatnot would have appeared. Like all of these ones that he lists: vanity, ambition, conceit, resentment. Like you're like, wouldn't it be easier just to be like a super arrogant badass that like wins at everything? And Jung is sort of saying that you don't become a winner unless you deploy these emotions in your favor. Unless you take these moral efforts to understand why you're wrong, why you might fail, your weak sides, and all that. The tools that you need to conquer your unconscious will make you a great person, and therefore why don't we deify these tools? And I think Jung is suggesting that in the past we did, only unconsciously. The virtues of Christianity, for example, may have been the deifications of psychological tools that help us defeat the world, or defeat ourselves, or defeat our nature. No, not even defeat. Tools to deal with our nature, to ennobilize it and whatnot. I think that is a super interesting idea. I think this is fundamentally what Jung is trying to say, and a lot of what I'm pushing at here when we're talking about, becoming a juicy young man, is that like Jung has been stolen a little bit by people who don't really get what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that you have a nature, and the game is to try win, or to master, or craft that nature into its most powerful type by using these moral tools and whatnot. So yeah, that was my riff, James.
Mm. Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating because, Christianity is a very mysterious thing. It could be that there is a metaphysical reality and there is the Christian God who's listening to our prayers, whatever the nature of that may happen to be. We don't know, I don't know, and that would be, as Jung said at the beginning of this book, you'd be stepping out of line. Right? He has no business doing that, although he might in his private life, who knows. But what we can say about Christianity is it is an evolved system of beliefs which allow us to live harmoniously together across time. So it's almost a pragmatic philosophy of the unconscious, which is really fascinating. It's like there's nothing to throw away. So when he talks about moral effort, it's like, okay, what does moral effort mean? What is morality? And it's like, well, a good way to conceptualize it is this idea of there is a goal and there is good and there is evil. And it's like, I guess the goal is to do good. And in the Christian worldview, the hypothesis is, and I think this is correct, at least fundamentally, is if we all acted like Christ, then if we all adopted these virtues, for example, and he listed some of them, vanity, ambition, conceit, resentment, so overcome these false gods, we'll say, then we'll all live in a stable society together across a very long period of time. And that's actually reflected in the individuation process. So whereas the individual goes on his process of practicing virtue, overcoming evil, being moral, we'll say, that actually affects the entire society. And that's a terrifying idea, because it makes you the center of the world. That's why the kingdom of God is within you. That's why Christ is in you, which is really, really interesting. So I think that's one of the things he's getting at here is basically a scientific proof of the pragmatism of Christianity. Or not even necessarily Christianity, obviously there's the context of this book, but that particular process of exerting moral efforts to make yourself a more psychically healthy, stable person, to keep those projections under control, is the exact same idea played out in your own mind, the exact same idea as the Christian collective of we're going to be moral together to overcome the metaphysical evil. It's just exactly the same thing, just played out at different levels. So he's created a proof for Christianity in a way, at least on the pragmatic end.
We we could go down that rabbit hole and go all the way to the end, and you do go to metaphysical places, and it becomes incredibly compelling. It's amazing. This is what this book is, just so mind blowing and fucking frightening as well, because we're talking about a evil force in the metaphysic that has a lot of power and a lot of sway over this world. But fundamentally, you're right. Like, it's such an interesting idea that you have that nature, and in order for you to redeem that nature and turn it into its most profound and powerful manifestation, is a gift to society and sorts out all the world's problems if you can get enough people to do it. That's a fucking amazing idea. And like, it is the foundation of individualism. And what's fascinating is that's considered a moral endeavor. It's the idea of morality. And the traditional Christian morals are what you need to do that, you could say. Maybe not Christian per se, but generally we say traditional morals per se. Just having a moral code, which seems to work. What's fascinating is that we have in this other camp, and what's getting pushed a lot in this modern world, is that we don't have a nature, and therefore we don't need to have a moral compass in order to deal with our nature. Instead, we're free to do whatever we want, and the only thing that is restricting us is our lack of technology in some way. And that's a really interesting idea, because the idea is that our creations are going to save us. Our creations are going to redeem us. So we've got this problem where we're like, oh, I want to be a girl. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all these surgeries and take all these pills, and that's going to change me that's going to redeem me into the form that I want. That's that fundamental cathartic transformation. That's the resurrection. That's the redemption that I want, and it's going to be achieved this way. And the thing is that there's no moral conquest there. And so in many ways, it's amoral. In many ways, you could even push the idea of satanic in it. Like, that's what they would have meant when they say the word satanic. And this is why I think it's worrying to see the world so viscerally jump into these things without any hesitation. We don't really know the dangers of what we're doing, because we're denying psychology, human nature, mother nature, metaphysics, all this crazy stuff, and leaping forward into the pedestal of progress. And who fucking knows where that's going to go. But anyway, next week,
I want to throw in just one quick line. It's like
we'll never end.
Our collective myth is moving from Christianity to Faust. Is what a lot of this is doing. So whether or not it's a sinister conspiracy by the elite, or if it's just a natural thing that's occurring within our unconscious. But it reminds me when you were saying, like, we need technology to transcend. I have to, of course, end with the flat Earth. and the flat Earth myth will say, you know, there is the Earth and there is the dome over the Earth, and what the elites are trying to do is use technology to break out of the Earth, which is essentially reach transcendence. So we need technology to reach transcendence, which is fascinating. And technology is fundamentally a Faustian endeavor created by the scientific process, trying to build ourselves up from paradise lost up to the transcendent. So I thought I'd just drop the flat Earth bomb in there, because we have to.
And see, that's a really interesting idea, is that in order to reach the cosmic world, the world of the gods, we need to build a tech that can break us out of this fallen world. But the counter ideal that no one believes in anymore, because no one believes in spirituality or metaphysics, is that if you can redeem yourself through this moral endeavor to a high enough level, like Christ did, or Buddha even, it happens. It happens in your consciousness. And so the path is counterintuitive. That's a fucking astounding idea that people don't take serious enough, because that means that you don't need technology. You don't need anything. And if you don't need anything to do this, bar your psychology, no one can ever take that away from you. Whereas your technology can be taken away from you, no bother. You do not own it. It's just lumps of shit that lie around that you form into stuff. And I'm not saying technology is bad, it's neutral, but the moral energy you apply to it is determines its madness. Fucking
Yes.
preaching, boys. All right, two chisel-jawed boyos just figured everything out. So that's our
Yep.
crack.